Welcome to a fantastic edition of Rebellion's educational series. I'm here with Michael Pregent, former military intelligence officer, Hudson Institute mind, who's joined us to talk about Iran's role in the crisis in Israel. Thank you, Mike, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Awesome. Now, please explain to us what's going on and how Iran is connected to, this, what's unfolded the
Right.
last week.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll explain Iran's role based on the level of what Hamas has done in the past. So if we see rocket skirmishes or a simple cross-border harassing attack that kills a couple IDF soldiers or maybe kills a couple civilians, that is still an Iran supported event in the argument of material support, right? Giving them weapons, giving them funds to do things. But when you see an attack like this, where Hamas goes across with the goal to be so violent as to force Israel into invading Gaza, that's very different because that also brings Iran into it, and also to take hostages. I think there are two goals here. One, to be so violent, so barbarian as to bring Israel into this conflict, to make it go into Gaza. I mean, Hamas and Iran want dead Palestinians, and they want to be able to blame Israel. The ugly truth is the Palestinians blame Hamas, but they're also terrified of Hamas. So when you see an attack like this is a IRGC-directed attack. This is an IRGC-approved attack. This is an attack approved by the supreme leader in the Islamic Republic of Iran, because they would not authorize a proxy tied to Iran to conduct an attack that would bring this level of response. I mean, Iran's about to lose a proxy in the Levant. Hamas leadership has been decimated, except for the ones in Qatar living it up in luxurious hotels. The effective commander, the effective leader of Hamas kill squad or kill team is dead, but there will be Hamas survivors. Iran is now concerned about losing one of its proxies. Lebanese Hezbollah is next. We're seeing skirmishes with IDF. We've seen the U.S., send in a naval capability that is there to deter Hamas. Lebanese Hezbollah, and to deter the Iraqi militias crossing into the Levant to support this effort. This has Iran's prints all over it, and the administration is trying to rely on whether or not they had a signal intercept from somebody in the IRGC saying the wedding package is on its way or commence operations. Those days are gone. These things are done months in advance. They're done through rolling meetings in Beirut, and a rolling meeting is you and I grab a coffee somewhere, walk around. There's a lot of background noise. We talk about the operation, or we go to a place that's safe, that's been guarded by, Lebanese Hezbollah in an instance, or in some cases, another group, and maybe even the Lebanese Armed Forces doesn't know that they're guarding a facility that these meetings are taking place in, because no one's even talking about the Lebanese Armed Forces. But that's a complete side note here. So these plans are in advance. These plans are tied to something. You're not going to get a signals intercept. NSA doesn't have the smoking gun. You're not going to get a source tell the CIA that, hey, I'm part of the IRGC and I was in the room when they directed this attack against the Lebanese Hezbollah. The Biden administration has put such a high bar on evidence here that they know they're not going to find it. But if they simply open their eyes, all the evidence is out in the open.
I've got to say, do you think Iran planned this? Was it their idea? What do you think the catalyst was for this attack? Is this a first step in a chess game in Iran's desire to just destroy Israel?
So we have to look back at the 2006, 2007 Lebanese Hezbollah Israel war, right? And how Iran was not able to support that effort. There had to be a ceasefire. Iran was calling for a ceasefire, so that because they could not resupply Lebanese Hezbollah with rockets and missiles, they couldn't resupply Lebanese Hezbollah with personnel. All that's changed now. Iran has its land bridge across Iraq. They're moving precision-guided missiles and rockets into Syria, into Lebanon, to be used by Iran's proxies. So to answer your question, Hamas's capability has been increased by Tehran for exactly this type of operation. Hamas exists to destroy Israel. Iran has created the Quds Force. The Quds Force, Quds means Jerusalem, to destroy Israel. Proxies, rockets, missiles, and destroy Israel's reputation in the international community, which it's very effective at. We saw this, the media jumped to these, breaking news. IDF, hits hospital, killing 300 to 500 Palestinians. That is
if you look at the video, the rocket was fired no more than a few hundred yards away.
Right, exactly. But even facts like that are not listened to on the other side. So you can't convince these Hamas supporters and people that are protesting that that's exactly what happened, that it was a rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, right? They want to believe it was the IDF that did this intentionally. And you can't change them with facts because they are so emotionally wrapped up in this hatred, and they are conflating Palestinians with Hamas. They're conflating every death with an Israeli aggression, and that's just not the case. We're not looking to change their minds. That's fine. The IDF will end Hamas's capability to be effective. And the next phase is ending Lebanese Hezbollah's ability to be effective. If we want to avoid all of that, the Biden administration needs to focus solely on Iran right now by making Iran feel the pain of economic sanctions, even kinetic strikes in Iran. We had drones used by Iraqi militias, directed again by Ismail Khani, the current Quds Force commander, Qasem Soleimani's replacement, to hit U.S. targets. They warned about it. If you continue to supply Israel with weapons, we're going to attack U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. They followed through. We haven't done anything about that. We need to conduct kinetic strikes against the militias in Iraq, but also kinetic strikes against IRGC facilities in Iran. You punch a bully in the face, it blinks. We killed Qasem Soleimani on January 2nd, 2020, and Iran backed down. Reagan decimated Iran's navy in 1988 in Operation Praying Mantis, and Iran backed down. Israel knows this bully. The administration continues to think they can negotiate with this bully. And Tehran is smiling all the way to the bank because at this point, the U.S. is competing with Iran in supporting Iranian terrorism by funding the same groups, by giving this money back to Iran, by looking the other way on illicit oil sales, $32 billion, and then also these hostage funds that go to Qatar. And everybody knows that Qatar's like the
are the illicit oil sales just Saudi Arabia, or is Qatar part of the illicit oil sales?
Oh, it's Iran's oil sales that I'm actually talking about here. The Biden administration the Trump administration imposed severe sanctions on Iran's oil and gas capabilities, right? They aren't able to sell it. The Biden administration has looked the other way. There are sanctions in place. I've spoken with U.S. people inside U.S. Treasury that are there to actually look at violations of existing U.S. sanctions and are frustrated because all the triggers are there. All the triggers are met to reimpose sanctions, to strengthen sanctions. And the Biden administration is making a political decision to do nothing about it. And so that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Iran's oil and gas sales. You give a country that has a $440 billion GDP the ability to get $32 billion in oil and gas sales, something they couldn't do under the Trump administration. What do you think they're going to do with that money? We've seen every proxy that Iran touches increase its capability because since 2020. And now we're seeing the result of that. Israel is always the focus of this. Iran has its land bridge across Iraq. Iran has pushed guided, more sophisticated missiles and rockets into the Levant. And now they're able to move personnel. Every Iraqi militia leader wants to join this fight. They're ready. And it's Iran that makes the decision. And the more the Biden administration doesn't focus on Iran, the more likely that this is to become a regional conflict.
What about the Sunni versus Shiite conflict? Will that help us at all here, or will that be looked the other way?
It's really interesting that Hamas is a Sunni terrorist organization, right? Iran has supported Al Qaeda going back to when they asked Lebanese Hezbollah to train Al Qaeda on how to conduct suicide attacks, how to use IEDs, how to conduct complex attacks. It was Lebanese Hezbollah that taught Al Qaeda how to conduct terrorist attacks. an Iranian proxy. So when we talk about the Sunni Shia, Hamas is a Sunni organization tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, financed by Qatar, financed by Iran. Iran is using Qatar to do these negotiations. Hamas operatives are in Doha giving the order to conduct these attacks with Iran's blessing. And the Sunni Shia divide here is it's the Iranian people that are against what Iran is doing, the regime is doing. It's really interesting. It's the Palestinians that are silently condemning Hamas for this attack. But when a mom goes out and says, don't launch that rocket here, my kid is going to get killed when the Israelis respond, Hamas says that's what your kid's job is. Your son is supposed to die. He's supposed to be a martyr. There is that default reaction in both Sunni and Shia populations to support the Palestinians. But when you conflate Hamas with support for the Palestinians, they collide, they clash. Because if you truly want to help the Palestinians, then you should be against Hamas. And if you look at these Arab countries that are being asked to take in Gazalians, right, ahead of the IDF invasion of Gaza, none of them want to do so. Why? Because Hamas governed Gaza. This population voted for Hamas. The fighters are in these families. The fighters for Hamas are sons of the Gazalians that they would be bringing in. Egypt is smart enough to know not to let Hamas militants in because al-Sisi is against the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas is directly tied to that as well. So that's the Sunni Shia divide in all of this. You have Lebanese Hezbollah Shia, Palestinian Islamic Jihad Shia, and Hamas Sunni, all going against a common enemy.
So how does Israel deal with such a toxic population?
Well, there's that saying in Israel that if we laid down our arms, we would all be killed. If they laid down their arms, there would be peace, right? So Israel has to go in. This is their 9/11. I just looked at the numbers. Israel is such a small country. They lost 1,300 Israelis, to include a lot of foreigners, to include 27 Americans on October 7th. That's the equivalent of 250,000 Americans being killed in a terrorist attack. We went to war in two countries for 20 years on 9/11 after losing 2,996 Americans. They lost 1,300 on that day. They are equating Hamas with ISIS. They are going to destroy Hamas. Hamas is going to be decimated and degraded. It's now whether Iran pulls the trigger and says, go to Lebanese Hezbollah, go to the Iraqi militias, and they go themselves. If the Biden administration wants to prevent that and let this solely be about Hamas, it needs to put all the pressure and all the pain on Iran, because Iran could stop this tomorrow if it wanted to.
Really just so insightful, so fantastic, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on today. At the end of the day, this is really just a question of how far Iran will take it. And Iran can't fight America. So the question is, will America be there for Israel? And it seems that they will, since the numbers for Biden are just, he has to support Israel all the way. It's, 8 out of 10 voters, 4 out of 5 voters want to support Israel.
Right. So the United States is key here. U.S. resolve is key. But it's more than sending, a naval military capability there. We actually have to be able to have the decision on the desk that if this happens, we need to have some red lines that we actually enforce. I know the Biden-Obama team is not very good at it.
They don't like red lines. So.
They don't. Real quick on the hostages. And something that I think your viewers or your audience should know is, how come we don't see the faces of the 27 dead Americans? We should know their names. We should know their names. We should see their faces. We should have a countdown, or, in the chyron of every U.S. media channel saying day 27 or day 20 of the U.S. hostages. We don't know the faces. Now, that could be a security issue. We don't want to tell Hamas who's an American. We don't want to do these types of things. I get that. But the 27 dead Americans, we should know their names. We should see their faces. Now, in regards to hostages, I do believe that the American hostages were moved out of Gaza about a week ago, whether they're in Lebanon, en route to Tehran, or being held in Iraq somewhere, or even Syria. The Americans have been moved out. They are the best bargaining chip Iran has. And the Biden administration has now set the ransom payment at $1 billion a head, right? Now, there's a bunch of 40 countries have hostages that Hamas is holding. 40 countries. And where do those hostages go? I believe they'll go to Lebanon. I think they'll get out of the Gaza region. But the Israeli hostages, I think the Hamas will hold on to them because they don't care if they die. Iran cares if the Europeans die. Iran cares if the Americans die because they need them as bargaining chips. They don't care about the Israeli hostages, and that's one of the most frustrating things. And I am sobered when I hear an Israeli parent say that at least I know my child died and I can bury them because I can't imagine what it would be like to be a hostage to these animals, to Hamas. And we've seen the babies being poked at and made fun of in cages. And it's the moral equivalency of BS that I don't know how you get around this. A 9/11 event, if any country would have told us to stand down and not do something, we wouldn't have listened. We would have done what we did, right? And we should expect Israel to follow this through, and we should do everything we can to do that.
Wonderful. Michael, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. Really fantastic conversation. And Israel has its hands full. I just hope that Biden has the resolve. But what does make me feel better is that America is still mostly filled with religious Christians who will support the Holy Land and will support Israel. Though sadly, unfortunately, many of my fellow American Jews have decided that they are against, the Jew has always had the problem of many of our own hate us. And so it's something that people don't like to talk about, but almost half the time Jews are, have self-hating issues. It's a terrible, terrible infliction among our people, which, kind of rears its ugly head in global politics.
Well, Americans have that now too. We're the only country being taught to hate itself. We're the only country that's being taught to hate their national anthem, their flag, and you see it in any international event.
Michael, that is very well. So you're totally right. Yes, you're totally right.
Right. Now, thanks for the time. It's a issue that I hope we can talk about again, because we definitely need to counter a lot of the narratives that you hear in the media. Media is not asking about Americans hostages. They're not showing the faces of dead Americans. And John Kirby in the past, we've seen it going back to 2016. If you're a dual citizen or a naturalized American, the State Department under the Biden-Obama administrations have always downplayed an American if they were a dual citizen or an American that was naturalized. And I find that offensive as an American. An American is an American. Dual citizens, I get it. But as soon as you get that American tag, America should care. They shouldn't care just 50%. They should care 100% because it's still an American. It was an attack on every civilized country in the world by animals, by ISIS. ISIS wearing Hamas.
I think America should have sent troops to Israel by now, personally.
Yeah. There are special operators there. There are intel guys there. There are advisors. There are intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets there. There are all those things. And Colonel Kurilla, I know I've known him since 2005 in Mosul. I went on a raid with him back in the day. We caught a Al Qaeda operative, the number 4 guy in Iraq at the time. And the guy, I hope he's still the same Lieutenant Colonel Kurilla that I knew, and I hope he's still the same Colonel Kurilla that was in charge of the Ranger Regiment as CENTCOM commander, and I have not seen a difference in the man yet. So that's good. And he's in charge of this, and I hope that the White House has said, General, make sure your commanders know that if they see this, they can act without calling back to the National Security Council and asking Jake Sullivan if it's okay to go after an Iranian proxy.
Oh, very well said. Very well said.
Thanks.
Well, Michael, do well, and we'll talk soon. God bless America.
Thanks.